Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Rachael.
And I'm Andrew.
And we are Picture the Scene podcast, brought to you by Aura Studios. We are a true crime podcast aiming to put you, the listener, at the scene of the crime. We bring you a new episode on a weekly basis, with Andrew mainly focusing on lesser-known crimes from the UK and Ireland. However, I like to take on some of the bigger, more well-known cases from time to time, and today is absolutely no different.
Yay.
Yay! As we are a true crime podcast, listener caution is advised. And again, today is no different. Season 2, episode 25, entitled The Dark Side of Tinder, will take you on a journey across the pond all the way to Auckland, New Zealand. If you happen to like what you hear, please do follow us on whatever social media platform you prefer. And wherever you listen, if you have the capability, then why not give us a rating and review as well? These ratings and reviews mean so much to us because not only do we love hearing from our wonderful listeners, but it does encourage other listeners to find us and come give us a try. Thank you to everyone who's left us a rating and review.
Thank you.
And if you like us that much that you want to support us, you can do so for less than the cost of a small Americano on Patreon. We release bonus content every month, and we've also recently started taking recommendations from our lovely Patreon subscribers. Supporting our pod means the world to us, so thank you to each and every one of you. And with this in mind, I wanted to say a big thank you and shout out to our latest Patreon subscriber, Nicholas Nixon, who actually reached out to us and asked us to shout out and dedicate his subscription to his amazing wife, Zoe Nixon, who apparently ignited his passion for true crime. So thank you to Nicholas and to Zoe.
Yeah, thank you both. And obviously, we'd never not shout your wife out, but it also means that we wouldn't ignore you either. So welcome, both of you. Glad you like the pod. Thank you for supporting us. It does mean a world. And thank you for your kind words that you sent us as well. Much appreciated.
Yeah, look forward to hearing your feedback on our back catalogue, guys.
Indeed.
And finally, for now, the links to our social medias and Patreon can be found in the show notes or by visiting patreon.com/scenepod. That's patreon.com/SCENEPOD. And finally, for now, the links to our social medias and Patreon can be found in the show notes or by visiting patreon.com/scenepod. That's patreon.com/SCENEPOD. So, Andrew, before we get into it today, how have you been since we last spoke?
I've been great, thank you. Busy with work, busy with life, but all good. What about yourself?
Absolutely. Full on DIYing as well, hey?
Well, my wife has, but yeah.
Bravo. I thought you might try and take the state the claim there, but no, bravo.
Anyone who knows me knows that my best muscle in my body is my head. The rest of it, it's pretty useless. Mostly.
Not at all. But yeah, all good. Thank you. This way, yeah. Since we last spoke, I've won a netball cup final.
Yes, you're
gold medalist.
Gold medalist, and everyone. I wish I could share the photograph of Rachael with a gold medal because I have never in my life seen anyone so happy as Rachael holding that gold medal.
Guys, 37 years of age and a first-time gold medalist. I was going to be happy.
It warmed my heart and it made my life feel complete. I didn't even win it.
Oh, bless. I will allow you to put it on the socials if you want.
Okay, then. I will do.
Nice. Okay. Well, all that is left for me to say is, are you ready for some true crime?
Always. I was born ready.
Oh, that's it. That's it. I could tell that was coming. Okay. Well, if it's safe for you to do so, I'd like you all to sit back, relax, and picture the scene. Today, we're taking you back to Saturday, the 1st of December, 2018, to the bright lights and big city of Auckland, New Zealand. It's a beautiful summer's day with temperatures reaching highs of 24 degrees Celsius, that's around 75 degrees Fahrenheit. During the afternoon, the clouds had scattered through the sunny skies, and the temperature grew mild later on into the evening, finally settling around 18 degrees Celsius, favourable for midsummer in the southern hemisphere. And it's here in the bustling city of Auckland, on the 1st of December, that we meet a young woman by the name of Grace Millane, a 21-year-old British tourist on a backpacking trip of a lifetime. Grace had graduated earlier that year from the University of Lincoln with a bachelor's degree in advertising and marketing. and she was from Wickford, Essex, a small town approximately 30 miles east of London, with a population of just over 33,000. There was a reference to the Domesday Book on Wickford, Essex, but I thought I'm not stealing your limelight on that, so I chose not to comment on it.
Fair enough.
Being such a small town, Grace had big dreams and had jumped at the chance to embark on a year-long solo backpacking trip around the world in celebration of graduation, and before she headed back into the all-too-serious world of work. After spending the first 6 weeks visiting South America, she arrived in New Zealand on the 20th of November for a 2-week stopover before she would continue on with her travels around the Southern Hemisphere. Throughout her trip, she'd been in constant contact with both her family and friends, sharing her experiences through her social media posts, and also keeping everyone updated on her whereabouts via numerous texts, with pictures of her exciting tours and travels, and calls too. And I guess that kind of comes with the territory when you're a solo traveller.
Yeah, you'd think so, wouldn't you?
Yeah, and I guess you'll meet people along the way, but you'll also want to showcase and document everything to everyone back home because you are on your own and not living that experience with somebody you know well, on your travels. But just a short 24 hours following a date with a man, her parents would be living their worst nightmare when Grace, who was due to celebrate her 22nd birthday on the 2nd of December, failed to respond to any posts, messages, or calls. She had quite simply vanished without a trace. And it didn't take long for the Millane family to raise their concerns with local authorities in Auckland, and the police immediately launched a search for the backpacker, whilst trying to trace her last known whereabouts through security camera footage and the digital trail left by her mobile phone. Back to the 1st of December, and that evening Grace had arranged to meet a Tinder date, Jesse Kempson, a 26-year-old local man who she'd hit it off with on the dating app. The two had arranged to meet in the busy central business district of Auckland, where they proceeded to visit several bars in the city centre, including Sky City Entertainment Complex. Here they would enjoy some drinks and play a round of mini golf. And I actually looked at the Sky City Entertainment Complex, and it feels like it's one of those places where everything is under one roof. You can go indoor skydiving. You can do they have those machines that blow air up. Have you heard of them?
Yeah, I like your description, but I know what you mean now. Yeah, where you hold it, you got the wings and you go like that.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
And you can also do a bungee jump indoors. It's just there seem to be a lot of things going on in that complex. So quite an interesting place to take someone on a date, especially if they're visiting the city for the first time. Eventually, the pair returned to Jesse's hotel room at the City Life Hotel in central Auckland, where they were captured on the CCTV at the hotel at 9:40 p.m. This would be the last time Grace would be seen alive. So what do we know about Jesse Kempson? Jesse was born in Auckland and grew up in the city of Hastings, which is located to the east of the North Island of New Zealand. You're probably wondering why he was staying in a hotel if he was a local. And the answer is he was reported to be between residences at the time of Grace's murder. According to newspaper reports, he'd actually recently moved out of his apartment and was staying at the hotel temporarily whilst he secured a new lease. But there are also reports that he had intentions to stay in the budget hotel for some time and that he wasn't in any rush to find a new permanent residence. A couple of conflicting reports around that. Jesse was already known to authorities as he had previous convictions for assault on his former partner, along with threatening to distribute intimate images of her on the internet. And in addition, he also had a history of violence towards the opposite sex and had been accused of sexual assault by several women over the last couple of years.
So just overall, a not very nice person, and as our friend Bob over Twisted Britain would say, just a bit of a bad bastard.
Yeah, I think that's a really nice summary of him. And that's the thing, he'd had convictions for the assault, but he was able to carry on with some quite awful behavior. Some of his ex-flatmates would go on to kind of say, which I'll touch on towards the end of the episode, it would make this crime that it should have been preventable because he shouldn't have been out and able to do what he did. essentially.
Yeah.
Back in 2016, he was also charged and convicted of stealing 2 vibrators and a sex toy from an adult store in Auckland. So once he was identified as being the last known person to see Grace before her disappearance on the 1st of December, it was checked on the police database. His name was checked on the police database. And police immediately grew concerned for Grace's safety and ramped up their search efforts, and rightly so. However, it would all be in vain. Only 8 days after she was last seen alive, and 6 days after she was reported missing, Grace's body would be found in a suitcase, buried in a shallow grave in a wooded area of a regional park just west of the city, on the 9th of December 2018. The exact circumstances and the motive behind the murder are still very much unclear, as Jesse's version of events have changed multiple times, both during the investigation, at the trial, and since.
Just out of interest, if the suitcase was buried, how did they find it?
So he was tracked, his whereabouts following the disappearance, and they were actually looking for, in that woodland area, they were looking for disturbed ground. So it was discovered like as a disturbed patch of ground, and it was obviously uncovered as part of the investigation.
That's some good police work there, because that sounds obvious, but it's not so obvious because sometimes those things are just easily overlooked, aren't they?
You're absolutely right. And interestingly, it's something I make a comment on later. So we will put a pin in that for now, Mr. Ogden.
Let's do it.
Okay. After a series of inquiries and a collection of evidence mounting against him, including incriminating Google searches for flesh-eating birds, which was a particularly disgusting one that was raised red flags. He also looked for the hottest fires, and also quite an interesting one, large bags near me. So obviously that's the suitcase, right?
It's a suitcase. It's just
yeah.
You can see the thought process.
Yeah. You wouldn't be like, in my opinion, if you were going to Google for a suitcase, you wouldn't be Googling large bags near me. You'd put like duffel bag suitcase shop near me or something. Like large bags, just I mean, they come up with like the kind of Tesco shopper bags or something, maybe. Do you know?
Yeah.
Okay, so these Google searches, along with more evidence, enabled them to arrest Jesse on the 8th of December. They discovered Grace's body the following day. It would transpire that upon the pair returning to his apartment on the 1st of December, just hours before the clock struck 12 and she was due to celebrate her 22nd birthday, Grace Millane was strangled to death by Jesse Kempson. Shockingly, just hours after he took the life of Grace, he actually logged back into Tinder to arrange a date with another woman. And I think that's like kind of shows the kind of guy that we're dealing with here. And I guess it's not touched on in the transcripts and things like that, but probably the potential signs for, a serial killer, like in terms of his cool, calm, collected state, logging back into an app and kind of searching to identify his next victim.
Yeah, definitely. As you were talking, I was thinking to myself, did he intentionally mean to kill her, or was it an argument gone wrong, or she said no and he lost his temper or stuff like that? But then when you said he logged back in again, it makes me think maybe he intended to and he liked it, so he thought, why not have another go?
Absolutely. And again, put another pin in that because we will go on to talk about that.
Any more pins and I'll look like Hellraiser.
Jesse would actually go on to meet that date for drinks while Grace's body laid lifeless in a suitcase back in his hotel room. But luckily for his next victim, instead of the charming and charismatic Jesse who had come across to Grace on their first date, he actually came across as quite weird and unsettling, which prompted her to cut short the date and leave, which likely saved her life.
Do you think that? Because obviously he wouldn't have intentionally tried to be weird or unsettling.
No.
So do you think that experience he had killing Grace subconsciously altered his personality and maybe his patience in putting a persona on to try and get a victim. He just was more eager just to get a victim, so he came across as weird and unsettling rather than fake and false.
Yeah, because he'd never like executed his plan potentially, and he didn't know how to contain those feelings.
Yeah, like he had the bloodlust, maybe.
And quite often we see in the early stages of like these criminals building up their kind of attacks, and they progress, don't they? Like he has done through assaults, and then sexually like aggravated assaults, and now to murder. He's not had that downtime to like get over it, I guess, and then go again. He's just gone straight back in to the game, probably not able to catch his breath maybe, and calm his emotions as well, potentially.
Do you think, Rachel, now, I know you've never used Tinder. I know I've never used Tinder. I was watching with my wife, there's a point to this sidetrack here. I was watching with my wife the first season of Married at First Sight UK. Have you ever seen that?
No, but I know I understand the concept.
Yeah, I hope so is the title. But but so
You're a bit cheeky today.
One of the couples, they got married, but then like a couple of weeks later, and I hope it's like 7 years old, so I hope I'm not spoiling this for anyone. But she was messaged by her friend who said that she saw her new husband on Tinder, active, and then wow. she spoke to the camera where it says like he's at home, he can't come and meet me. Yeah, he's active on Tinder right now. Obviously, she left him and whatnot, but do you think it can become like an addiction? Having to like swipe left or whichever way you swipe to meet someone, left or right.
Like another game, isn't it? Like essentially, because you only get the notification. Buzz, yeah, and you only get the notification that they too have swiped on you until you swipe on them and make that decision. And that in a sense is like, like a free spin at a casino kind of thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's that adrenaline buzz, like to get that hold up someone likes me type thing.
We're so geared, aren't we, in society now to be on our phones and have everything accessible in that moment. And, he's probably built up this rapport with Grace on Tinder and had all that back and forth contact, and then executed his like date and the plan. And then, he's after his next one because, yeah, there's an element of, oh, can I get away with it again, potentially as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, with the key suspect now in custody and the body located, New Zealand police had to build their case against Jesse Kempson, and build it they did. The plethora of digital evidence enabled them to piece together an exact timeline of events, as they gathered evidence from mobile phone records, social media interactions, and security camera footage on the 1st of December, all of which helped the team establish the connection between Grace and Jesse, track their movements on the night of the murder, and pinpoint also potential locations of Jesse in proximity to where Grace's body was found 8 days later. The police were then tasked with gathering sufficient evidence to link him to the crime. As we know, just because he's at the scene of the crime doesn't mean it will convert to a guilty verdict in court. So the team set about searching and closely examining his apartment and the vehicle he rented to analyse forensic evidence, as well as conduct interviews with witnesses who interacted with the couple on the night of the murder. Given the high-profile nature of the case, as it garnered like international attention across the world, not only because Grace was a tourist visiting the country, but also the crime rates in New Zealand are really low. Investigators and prosecutors took extra care to ensure that evidence was preserved and presented in a manner that would withstand scrutiny in court. This specifically included the police closely managing the chain of custody for physical evidence and working closely with forensic experts to analyse and interpret the findings, so the trail of evidence would be a slam dunk for the prosecution, which I feel deserves a special call out, as how often do we hear when you've got a British tourist visiting a country, that the evidence can be handled quite poorly, or the crime scene as well, because the police can be so desperate to catch the culprit, close the case, and make sure that like tourism, for instance, isn't affected as part of that process.
Yes, definitely. And they sound like a great police force. Whenever I think of the New Zealand police force, I think of, have you seen the TV show called Wellington Paranormal?
No.
Oh, it's so funny. He's hilarious. But it's like a comedy, and it's New Zealand police, and obviously the police are a little bit stupid in it. So I get the picture of that in my head. But actually,
Is it a bit like Brooklyn Nine-Nine?
Never seen that. But this is set on like a documentary style type thing, fly on the wall. But actually, yeah, they sound, maybe it's because they don't have lots of bad crime, that when they do, they can pay more attention to it. They're less desensitized, you think? And less harassed?
I actually think, like, believe it or not, they were being harassed quite a bit by international reporters continuously, everywhere they searched. They were just hounded in 2018, especially the British press. So I don't actually think it was that. I just think that New Zealand was so shocked at what had gone on that it was almost from day one, we have to handle this with absolute care and attention. And they kept the family up to date continuously as well. Grace's family went on to kind of commend the New Zealand police for the fact that obviously they traveled to the country, but they were kept up to date with what was going on, and it wasn't like a fight. They didn't have a fight on their hands to gain information.
That's good to know. I know sometimes we criticize the police, but I guess it's like every profession, isn't it? You get some people who are terrible at their job, most people who are just good, and some people who are exceptional. And this sounds like maybe these are within the exceptional bracket.
And though it wasn't just the police. So, for instance, Jesse hired a car. He didn't have a permanent car. So he went to the car hire rental, which is where he put the suitcase and then drove out to the location. The car hire company really quickly tracked down the vehicle that was already out with somebody else, but that was taken into police custody really quickly. Obviously they were able to track the whereabouts of the vehicle, which is what led them to the woodland. The hotel were very quick to provide the CCTV footage of Grace entering the building but not exiting it. Everything was handled, and to a certain extent, absolutely the police being on top of things, but the third parties that also supported the case, it was all executed really quickly and really well. And again, how often do we hear I think specifically of backpacking cases where tourists have died, and people have been like, oh no, we scrapped the CCTV, or the camera's broken, and we've not looked around for anything else, or the scene of the crime's been contaminated. There were just so many things that were well executed as well in this particular case.
Good.
But that for me, it was the fact that chain of custody wasn't broken, and that they'd done their homework with the specialists. The prosecutors had made sure that when they were bringing people in, experts to testify, that they were actually experts in the field as well, not just loosely tied to that particular field or something that could therefore be contested. The jury of 12 was sworn in on the 4th of November 2019, and the trial began. It was just 11 months after the backpacker went missing. During the trial, they would hear how Jesse had lured Grace into his hotel room the night before, strangling her. Oh, sorry. During the trial, they heard how Jesse lured Grace into his hotel room that night before strangling her. The prosecution accused him of eroticizing her death too. He'd actually taken intimate photographs of her body, so posing her.
Yeah, I get it.
And also he'd looked up pornography while she lay there, dead in his room. His defense counter-argued that the pair were having consensual sex, and that Grace had died accidentally during a consensual sex game gone wrong.
So what? He thought he finished himself off by looking at some porn.
Yeah, it just doesn't sit well with me. But how easy is it, without me going onto a rant about this, how easy is it to just say, oh yeah, you know, she told me she was into like what's it called, BDSM, and yeah, so it's not my fault I strangled her, like, you know, she told me it was fine. And yeah, it didn't like play out well, luckily. It was a story that the jury went on to reject, due to like the evidence that we'll go into in a minute. But it did actually fire up a debate in New Zealand on like BDSM and the whole like rough sex defense, and how it kind of normalizes violence against women when it comes to sexual acts, which was really quite powerful, you know, a conversation to be having, because it was really easy for his defense to kind of come up with that. Luckily there was enough evidence to argue it, but it does nothing for the victim and her family, does it, for people to even hear that story.
Oh, you're right. I was listening to the latest Twisted Britain yesterday, and while I have not fact checked this, they're normally right. They were mentioning on their episode that in Scotland it's one of the few places where, usually around the world, if you kill someone but you don't intend to kill them, that's your defence, then it's manslaughter, not murder, which is what maybe he was trying to get towards here, by the sounds of it. But in Scotland, if you intend to hurt someone, so I guess that includes rough sex as well, because you're intending to hurt someone, but you don't intend to kill someone, if they die anyway, then that's still just classed as murder.
Yeah,
so,
and
where you should be, shouldn't it?
Absolutely. And then there's no like weaker defense there around like, oh, it wasn't my fault, you know, because, well, actually you were engaging in like that rough sex, and you know, you knowingly caused harm to that person. And interestingly, I was chatting with somebody last week who worked in a state in America where if you served alcohol to somebody that went on to drive a car and kill somebody, you were culpable for the death of that person as well. So you, therefore, in that chain of command, had to think about your actions as a bartender, which I know is like really loosely coupled with that. But it's interesting because it makes us think more about how we do behave in situations like that, doesn't it? Like, and being less like, oh, it's not my fault, because everyone has a part to play.
Exactly right.
During the trial, evidence was also presented that suggested that Jessie had indeed premeditated the murder. Prosecutors argued that Jessie had searched online for ways to dispose of her body and had purchased cleaning supplies and a suitcase in the days leading up to the murder. So those Google searches were not in the wake of killing Grace.
There you go, then. You can't deny that, can you? You can't. Yeah, that's. How do you intend just to go and kill a stranger? I guess we're not killers, are we, Rach? So we'll never understand the logic. People justify things to themselves, but yeah.
I know. As we previously mentioned as well, he had also taken those intimate photos of her body after death. And like, why do that? If a sex game had gone wrong, like your behaviors in the wake of that would be so different to like his behavior, right? Of taking the photographs, going back on Tinder, watching porn, like it's all built up to like an awful picture. And that was coupled with the fact that he'd attempted to clean up the crime scene. So again, when those forensic experts had gone into the property, they were able to identify like blood, like DNA on the floor from the fact that like he'd like put her body in the suitcase and all sorts of like other things that had all mounted. And then obviously finding like her hair in the boot of the car. You know, if you've accidentally killed somebody, why have you gone to such effort to like clean up after yourself?
Do you think these people that kill and get caught, so just the ones who get caught, because there's plenty who don't get caught, do you think that, let's say you get 20, 30 years in life, or in prison, or life in prison for a murder, do you think to them it's worth it because they've managed to act out that fantasy? Or do you think at some point they're like, I wish I didn't do that?
I don't know how much they wish they hadn't done it, because that's that's an element of them having some sort of control over their actions. And I'd want to believe that ultimately he couldn't control himself, if that makes sense. Like, because otherwise, like, if you were able to control yourself, and then that's even worse. But what I do believe is that a lot of these people genuinely think they'll get away with it, and that's why they take out, you know, the precautions that they do. Like, but the day and age in which we live in now, with even mobile phone tracking, like, you know, if you switch off your mobile phone in this day and age, that is considered suspicious now. Like, let alone having it with you. There are cases being covered in the true crime world about individuals that leave their phone on at home, and it's like, even that's curious, because you got a text message which you didn't answer, or, you know, your phone was in the same part of the house for 4 hours, so you telling me you didn't get up off the sofa? And yeah, in theory you'd probably think, well, you know, whatever, there might be a plausible excuse to that, but even that is suspicious now. So these people who think they're going to get away with it are, like, so out of touch.
No, I get you, and I understand that majority of them have the confidence that they think they're going to get away with it, which is why they've got the confidence to do it in the first place. But I just mean, also get caught, even if they think they're going to get away with it. Do you think they are still happy they did it, and they prefer not to be in prison? They see the fact that they managed to kill someone and fulfill a fantasy worth it.
Potentially.
It makes me actually think, just then it popped in my head, there was a Scottish guy that I covered who killed someone, and then he got released.
Oh, yeah.
And he killed the dog walker, or he tried to kill the dog walker. He obviously, to him, it was worth getting caught, wasn't it? Because as soon as he could, he went out and killed someone again.
Yeah.
So maybe it is, yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing, like, there are some very unfortunate cases where prison is not rehabilitating people, like we discussed in that episode, isn't it? Yeah. It's just holding them up for a period of time and then releasing them again to fulfill their, like, desires that they can't control, their urges.
I don't think everyone can be rehabilitated, though. I know that's a full pod discussion, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And then that's where our sentencing system is a bit tricky, because it applies, like, basic logic, doesn't it, to a case of, like, X amount of years in prison, but not really then kind of addressing the, like, rehabilitation, the consequences of, like, serving the time, being re-released. In addition to all the forensic evidence that built up against him, ex-housemates of his had testified that Kempson had made disturbing comments about his desire to kill people throughout his, like, early 20s. And he'd also expressed an unhealthy interest in strangulation. And interestingly, due to the level of interest on this particular trial across the globe, Jesse Kempson was not named during or after his conviction due to a court suppression order. And those who testified against him initially had their identities hidden as well. So imagine at the time, if those people that were called upon to testify against him knew of his desires and urges. Imagine if his name had been shared wider in the backpacking community across the Southern Hemisphere or the world. How many more people might have come forward and said, you know, he raped me, or he tried to attack me, or he took images of me and published them on the internet. Like, there's so much more that could have, like, come to light about him during the trial that I guess they didn't want, hence the court suppression order. But that was actually lifted a year later, which is why we're able to obviously tell you his name. So the 22nd December 2020, that court suppression order was lifted.
I'm always in two minds about this, because part of me, and everyone's going to disagree with this, part of me, I don't like it when they release quite publicly, like, release a name and say we're looking for other people to come forward who may have been attacked by this person, or, you know, victim of crime, and again by this person. And I just think sometimes, I understand why it has to be done, but sometimes it's like they're seeking, it's like confirmation bias, isn't it? They're seeking, they think someone's guilty before they've even been tried, and so they're seeking extra.
Yeah, and in this case, I
validation.
guess it plays into that theory that could well have happened. So they didn't want to affect the case. And again, maybe it worked in the favor of the court system, because you wouldn't want a mistrial, would you?
You wouldn't know, I know, but I also see the point of doing that though. So I'm always torn because I always think, like, if some occasionally get people who, like that chap who accused several high-profile politicians, I forget his name, of sexually abusing him when he was a child, and it being like a massive paedophile ring and whatnot. Like their names got released, and it took years, and their names were dragged through the mud. But it turned out in the end, he had like a mental health problem, and he made it all up.
And I bet you there are still people that haven't read the follow-up newspaper articles that they were like innocent.
Exactly, but the names are put out there sometimes
Damage
by
is
the
done.
police by saying we're looking for potential other victims of these people. So in that situation, I think like the damage is done. But in other situations, you've got to think, how else are you going to find other victims or find other
Yeah.
crimes? So it's so difficult. I'm glad I'm not a policeman because it's so difficult.
And I think, like, especially now at the minute, there's a lot of exposure, isn't there, on information that should and shouldn't be shared during investigations into missing persons, murder inquiries, crimes in general. Like, very hot topic at the minute, isn't it? But if I take it back to like the Scott Peterson case that I covered a couple of episodes back, his alibi was shared with the general public. So all these people were coming forward saying that they saw his very generic car in a very generic place on this date with a very generic driver driving it. So, it is crazy in some instances that we are allowed to hear that kind of information. So I definitely agree with you. There is a fine line between what should and shouldn't be given. And I think that the information that is given can be heavily scrutinized in court and lead to like a mistrial or a case being like not properly presented, and therefore somebody not being convicted because of information that was not handled correctly.
Exactly, yeah.
So, following 3 weeks of evidence, coupled with the hundreds of hours of painstaking police work and a year of grief for the Millane family, it all culminated in the moment that 12 jurors agreed unanimously that the now 27-year-old Jesse Kempson was guilty of murdering Grace Millane. Jesse was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum non-parole period of 17 years. So, for those listeners not aware, this means that he will have to serve at least 17 years in prison before he is eligible to be considered for parole. The sentencing not only provided a sense of closure for Grace Millane's family, but also highlighted the importance of addressing the conversational topic of rough sex defense. So, as we spoke about earlier, that was the defense used by Jesse during the trial, and it was a kind of a moment of that's not going to wash here that New Zealand had made headlines for. Jesse actually tried to appeal his conviction just a year after his sentencing, and just a month after, unfortunately, Grace's father passed away following a short battle with cancer. But he was thankfully unsuccessful with his appeal. And like I say, thankfully, because like I don't know what on earth anyone would be thinking with this kind of case and all the evidence that was brought against him. What on earth they'd have been thinking about entertaining the appeal, if I'm honest. That is my personal opinion.
I agree. But then, like, I'm not defending people for appealing here, but 2 reasons. A, I guess it's their legal right, but B, if you're looking at, sorry, how long did he get in prison again?
17 years before he is considered for parole.
So if you're looking at a minimum of 17 years, I'd appeal even if I thought I wouldn't win, just in case.
And that's the thing, like, you're absolutely right. Everyone has a right to appeal. But yeah, thankfully.
Plus, these people can get off on bringing everything back into the public again and what they've done. There's also that side of it. It's almost like an extra thrill for them, being able to go over the details in the courtroom. Yeah.
That's the thing, actually. It was shortly after his appeal was rejected that he was named, because, there wouldn't be an opportunity for that to happen. So we mentioned earlier that the case garnered attention all around the world. And that is partly due to the fact that New Zealand in general has a very low crime rate compared to many other countries. So in 2021, I just kind of wanted to highlight it with some facts. The country's homicide rate was around 1.2 per 100,000 population. And that, if we compare it to the likes of the US, is at 6.5 per 100,000 population. So quite like a low crime rate. But the murder of Grace Millane also captured and shook the nation, given the fact that not only was she a young, innocent tourist visiting from Britain and alone in the country, but also, and I know this sounds a bit wild, but everyone was kind of shocked by it being so close to Christmas. Like when a country like New Zealand is all about like values and family and, and home and all of this going on, and the 1st of December full of hope for what's to come, it really quite shook them, because it was just like tragic in such like a family-led happy time. The outpouring of emotion and sympathy for Grace and her family was felt across the nation, with various outlets reporting that New Zealanders felt a deep sense of empathy and sadness for Grace and her family, who had lost their daughter in such a horrific manner while she was visiting their country. Following the verdict, there were public apologies from high-profile figures, including Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, who expressed her condolences and apologised to Grace Millane's family on behalf of the nation, where she should have been safe in their home. And what about Tinder's role in the crime? So there have actually been a number of high-profile cases worldwide where Tinder was involved in some way. But I want to stress that like the volume of those cases versus the actual volume of users on Tinder, like it's tiny. And I think that if you were going to say that Tinder was involved in the crime in some way, shape or form, you'd probably argue that other social media platforms like Snapchat, selling drugs, Facebook, connecting people, and other things like that are responsible, and they should be kind of named in these cases. And I think that's probably like a can of worms, if I'm honest.
Exactly.
But I think that it was an opportunity for us to highlight potential risks associated with online dating in general, not just through Tinder. And those risks are like meeting strangers, obviously, but also sharing personal information. You share a lot of your, like when you're building up conversations with people, what's your favorite animal called? Where did your mum grow up? What's her surname? My mum might have gone to school with her. And profilers are gaining information about your like personal data that they can help like farm out as well, not just like to cause any like crime against you as an individual, but they kind of give that information to companies that might misuse that. And also the possibility of encountering individuals with malicious intentions. Now, I just wanted to highlight that Grace took all the necessary precautions that night. She met him in a very busy place. She kept to well-lit areas. She was in touch with people. They were aware that she was on a date with him, which is why police were so quickly able to identify him as the last known person to be with her. And it was Jesse who took advantage of that. That needs to be like the key message here. Grace being on Tinder and going for a date played no part in her death. But what I did want to say is like we can mitigate those risks by taking steps like Grace did to meet in public places, telling friends and family about planned meetings, and also being aware of like red flags in the behavior of the person you're meeting, either in the run up to or during the date. Like, don't be afraid to call it short if something's not sitting well with you, and do your homework as well. Like, check out their friends on Facebook, any mutual friends, any people that might know the kind of profile that they've built and kind of vouch for them is always useful, especially, that only being really the case if you're in the country that they're in as well. But since 2018, I did want to highlight that dating apps like Tinder have implemented safety features, including photo verification and the ability to report or block suspicious profiles, which improve like user safety, which is really great to see. And so like if somebody had have got in touch with Tinder, like post these safety features being implemented and saying this guy's a convicted, rapist or attacker, or whatever that looked like, that there are now measures in place where users can do that.
Well, that's good, because I always thought with Tinder, there must be so many people, like catfish people, like put a photo that's 20 years old on it, or use someone else's photo. But if they got photo verification, then
yeah, and obviously they can choose not to verify themselves, but the verification just kind of robusts that, okay, they are definitely who they say they are. And so before we wrap up today, I wanted to bring us back to Grace and the memory of such a kind, fun, and loving daughter, sister, granddaughter, niece, auntie, cousin, and friend to many, by ending with some very emotional excerpts from victim impact statements from the Millane family. David Millane, Grace's father, said, "Grace was my sunshine, and she will be forever missed. She did not deserve to be murdered in such a barbaric way during her gap year." Her mother commented, "Grace was never just a daughter. She was my friend, my very best friend. I'm absolutely heartbroken that you have taken my daughter's future and robbed me of so many more memories that we were going to create." And finally, her brother described the emotional toll his sister's murder has taken on him, saying, "The tears I shed are never ending, at the thought of never having the chance to kiss my sister again." These victim impact statements really hit home on the truly awful, lasting effects that a tragic and pointless murder of a loved one has on all those left behind. It provides a powerful reminder of how precious life can be, and how perpetrators of crimes do not just take the life of their victim, but they take a piece of their family and friends' lives too. This has been Season 2, Episode 25, entitled The Dark Side of Tinder. What do you think, Andrew?
Yeah, interesting stories, interesting the case, but also the culture in New Zealand. It sounds like such a nice place. I've never been. I've known a couple of people from New Zealand. I know someone who lives there now who is English, so they were nice people. But yeah, it just sounds like it's a nation of, obviously with some exceptions, but a nation of nice people.
Wholesome, yeah. And so for one last time, if it's safe for you to do so, I'd like you all to relax, to close your eyes and picture the scene. You're new in a city, settled into backpacking life, and you've swiped right on a seemingly charming, charismatic guy who you've since agreed to meet. But is he really everything he's crept up to be? Okay, guys, thanks for listening today. Let us know your thoughts on the case.
Yep, thank you.
Bye.
All right.